Hey, for this series, we want to explore what it means to actually contribute something that we feel is meaningful. What is life outside of the job? We've all had torturous experiences working jobs. And maybe you feel like right now where you're at is it's just one of those toiling experiences. So what would it mean for you to live your calling, to do that thing that you are meant to do? It's something that we all wonder from time to time. Maybe it's the most dominant thought in your head. In fact, that's what gives you tension with where you're at right now because it's not there yet. We're calling this series Life's Work. And I love that because it conjures up for me maybe what it does for you. That big contribution that you are going to make in the world. That thing that will outlive you. The thing that you want to give your life to. The thing you want to be remembered for. Maybe you would even say the thing you are called or meant to do, your purpose in your working self. What are you supposed to contribute, output in this life? But I also like the title because it has another meaning, a meaning that might seem a bit more ordinary for most of us, and that is life is work. Because for some of us, we are nowhere near a calling right now. We just got a job, and that feels a little bit more real. See, there's a life's work that we long for, and there's a life's work that we live in that feels like reality right now for us. And our hope for the next 6 weeks is that we would begin to move, find, experience more of what we long for, even while the reality is what we live in, okay? That we would move maybe from what we have to do a little bit more into what we must do, or maybe what we are meant to do. A lot of us don't feel like we're close to that right now. We just got a job. And when I was preparing for this, I couldn't help but think of Office Space, which is the best movie about just a job ever. And Ron Livingston plays this character, Peter Gibbons, in that movie. And I've watched this 100 times. I love it. And the scene that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this idea was that scene where he's talking with his therapist. If you've seen it, you'll remember it. And he says, ever since I started working, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before it. So that means every single day you see me, that's on the worst day of my life. Then the therapist says, well, what about today? Is today the worst day of your life? And Peter says, yeah. And the therapist says, wow, that's messed up. You know, the idea that work is a curse is not new. The ancient Greeks, 2,000 years ago, the dominant idea, the dominant philosophy of what was really going on in the world, they believed that work was a curse. So much so that they thought that as women and men became more enlightened, less and less would they have to be responsible for menial tasks. It's what Plato believed. It's what Aristotle believed. That's what motivated him to advocate for slavery. Because there were just a few of us that were actually really meant to live for this transcendent identity, this transcendent consciousness. And we can't do that if it wasn't for all of the little people that were able to support our existence. Some of us would think that not much has really changed in 2,000 years. A lot of us still think that that might be the philosophy of some, that we need to elevate ourselves beyond the day-to-day grind, beyond what we have to do into what we are meant to do if only somebody would pay us for it, you know? That was the world in which Jesus showed up and started talking. That's the world in which the Christian movement began. And so some of you feel like you are stuck in that curse. You might not feel like you're a slave right now, but maybe you feel like you're stuck. Maybe you're in a job that a lot of us would want and you still feel stuck. Maybe you're in finance or politics. Maybe you make a decent living. Maybe you're a creative and you're actually able to produce something that puts food on the table and pays the rent, you know. Maybe you're in something that is just kind of a holding pattern until you get your calling. Maybe you're in a service industry which just, again, pays the bills before you really get into the zone. That thing that you would do if only somebody would book you or hire you or pay you to do it. Some of you don't even feel like you're engaged in the productive part of society. Maybe you feel sidelined because you're a parent right now. Maybe you're a mom like Christy or a dad, you know, and maybe that's your life right now. And you don't feel like you're really in the mainstream of creating new things and innovating and influencing. Maybe you, as rewarding as that might be, you might not feel like you're actually in your calling yet. You're stuck. You're at a dead end. And you're thinking to yourself, you know, if only I was in that calling, that thing I was meant to do, I would be thriving. I'd be excited. And just you wait until you see what I'm capable of. All right? All of us long to be a part of or contribute to or create something that will outlive normal life and outlive us. What is that in us? My dog does not worry about his purpose on this planet, but I do. I worry about doing something that matters, that means something. Maybe something I'm called to do, something I'm meant to do. We want to talk about that for 6 weeks. Where do you think that calling comes from? There's some people who would tell you that it comes from the inside. You know, that it comes from some sort of assessment of what drives you and maybe your unique personality and gifts and talents lined up with some need in the world or opportunity. That's your calling. It comes from, it's a choice that you make, all right? Oprah told my latte to tell you that your passion will lead you to your purpose. Maybe. But then there are people who suspect that if I'm actually called to something, it's from an external source, right? It's not just a choice that I make. Maybe you feel like it comes from the universe, or it comes from God, or it comes from the needs of the world, but something is almost imposed on you, and that's what you're called to do. And even though for a moment that might feel a little restrictive, if you think about it, that's way more exciting. At least it is for me, because that means that my calling in the world is not something that I choose to do. It's something that I must do, something I'm compelled to do, something I'm responsible to do. And I can't wait to do that, because if I can get in that zone, then maybe I'll start to thrive. And maybe the work won't feel like such a chore, if I'm in that calling. And maybe it does come from somewhere else. The other good news about that is that my calling is not just about me. What I choose to do with my life has something to do with you, and has something to do with the world, and what you choose to do with your life. What work, what field you choose to give yourself to has something to do with the people around you, and I like that idea. That makes sense to me. That's what I long for. Maybe you do too. So here's what I want us to do for 6 weeks, and I'm thrilled about this. For 6 weeks, we are going to look at 6 callings that I believe are imposed, given to every single one of us. 6. Now, before you panic, I don't mean to say you have 6 jobs that you have to have at the same time, 6 hats that you have to wear, okay? But rather, 6 dimensions of who you really are as you work. And guess what? You already have an instinct for these things. You're probably already doing some of them and you don't even know it. So all we're really doing for 6 weeks is just highlighting them, causing us to pay attention to the way we think and the choices that we make as working individuals that will position us to live our calling, wherever we're at. Now, for some of you at the end of 6 weeks, I completely suspect that you may choose to change your career path. But that is not the goal of the series. This isn't like that career counselor that you met with when you were a senior in high school who told me I was supposed to be in administrative work. I haven't done that since, which is probably why work has been so tough. But that's not what this series is. We're not going to line up your Myers-Briggs and your Strengths Finders and then spit out the 6 jobs that you should have in the world, okay? But instead, we want to do something hopefully even more helpful, which is how do you approach what you do with renewed energy, passion, perspective, so that you can make the most of whatever you choose to do. And guess what? Studies have shown, and I think this is true of my own soul, when I am living completely myself in whatever I do, I am more confident about the decisions I make in my career, okay? So it's possible you might discern a change, but what we hope everybody experiences is more life in their work, okay? So to begin, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to get right back to the beginning of the purpose of humanity, why we exist in the first place, at least from one perspective, okay? Something that you can consider. Why are we here? And why do we long to work? And why do we long to work at something that outlives us and is bigger than us? What is that, okay? So today we're going to talk about a paradigm an awareness. And then for the next 5 weeks, we're going to talk about choices that we make within that awareness, okay? So today is a way of thinking. The next 5 weeks, if you will, is kind of more of a way of doing, okay? So look forward to that, but we can't give you all of it in one shot. Today, we're going to talk about what it was like when it all got started, all right? So I want you to turn, if you have a Bible, and I hope some of you do, to Genesis chapter 1, way back there. Genesis chapter 1. And as you're going there, I want to address maybe some obstacles that all of us have when we approach the first couple chapters of the Bible. We all know, whether you come from a church background, a Christian background or not, we all know what's in the first few chapters of the Bible. It claims to talk about how everything got started and who got it started. And there's all sorts of tension that we have trying to compare that with what we're discovering about the world through our current scientific method, okay? So I want us to take Genesis for what it means to be. At face value. Genesis has an agenda. Genesis was written to a specific audience, and we were not that audience. So it's going to take us a little bit of humble translation to put us in a position to learn in the way that Genesis wants us to learn. So to call out one example, just in case you're wondering, this is not what we're talking about this morning, but just to set us up for this way of thinking. Do I believe, for instance, that the world was created in 1 week? The bottom line is, I have no idea, okay? It's possible based on a certain paradigm, but it would seem unlikely based on what we're learning about the world and the way that we learn about the world right now. But I'll give you this. I believe that there's a God who is greater than what he makes. And so it's not much of a stretch for me to believe that he could do that kind of a thing. Whether or not he did, I have no idea. And that's not the case that Genesis is trying to make. Genesis is not a book that's trying to tell you how everything happened, beat by beat, minute by minute. Instead, Genesis is trying to tell you a bigger question. Why? Why is this stuff here? And I want to take Genesis on its own terms. I want to let the text say what it's going to say and not try to shoehorn it into something I want it to claim to make a case or not. Okay, you with me on that? So Genesis is giving us purpose. It's giving us meaning, which is why it's a good place to start to consider this version of why we're here and why we want to be a part of something bigger. All right? When it gets to that moment in Genesis where God is talking about why we exist, why this all got started, he says this in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And I love the way this one pastor renders the original language, because he says, God spoke, let us make human beings in our image. You've heard this before. Make them reflecting our nature. So, there's your purpose, so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of the earth. That's your purpose statement right there. Chapter 2, the reason chapter 2 is there is to zoom in on this moment. It gives us greater detail of what was really going on. And chapter 2, verse 15 is the sentence I want to focus on together this morning. Chapter 2, verse 15 says this, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden, and here's your purpose, to work it and take care of it. The Lord God took the man, took humanity, and put them in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. That's your purpose, which sounds like really bad news. The purpose of your life is chores. What I want to reveal for us this morning, I'm excited to reveal this, is that what was really going on when these words were originally penned, not in our language, the words meant more than they mean to us. A little bit is lost in translation as you'd expect it to be. For us, we look at work, we look at take care of it, and we think that's tasks. Okay, the purpose of my life is to do the stuff that God was above doing. God, like he created the world, he's like, crud, somebody's got to take care of this stuff. So how about these people? Suckers. The original language, not only does it say more than work, it's more of a sense of like cultivate. Some of your Bibles, if you have them, might say that word cultivate, to bring life out of, to produce out of, okay? But the original verbs there did not give the impression of a chore or a task, something to check off a list, but more of a sense of meaning and of purpose, okay? So it's like you were meant to do this, meant to cultivate in the earth, meant to work, yes, meant to thrive. It may be bad news, and I hope to change that today, but bad news that work existed before anything went wrong, which means work very well possibly may exist after everything is done. We exist in eternity still as working people, as productive people. So here's what's exciting about this, and the first calling that I believe everybody in the room has. I think we are called to be producers. And I use that word carefully, knowing what city I say that in the middle of. All right? But, since we live in Tinseltown, I want to see if we can try and sketch together a definition with the people in the room based on your experience of what a producer is, okay? And this is fine if it's in the entertainment field. A lot of us probably work in and around that. Would somebody venture a guess or venture a definition of a producer? Anybody? Money. Yeah. Takes all the pieces, puts them together. That's good. Krista? Makes something happen with other people. That's good.
A person who keeps the vision and the voice of a project and gets it all done.
Vision and a voice of a project and gets it all done. This is great. This has been my experience, what you guys said. Every time I ask, I've never been a producer in any stretch, but every time I ask a producer what they do, they give me different answers, which is fine. The only thing I've been able to discern is always the case is a producer does things with people and an executive producer pays for it, generally. And that may or may not be your experience. Here's one way that a producer has been explained to me. Somebody who carries the torch of an idea from completion to end. Carries the torch of a vision from beginning to end. A producer is somebody who ensures that the vision is not lost in the process, all right? So my sister, she was a producer for a big event planner in LA, and somebody would come with a vision for this event they were putting on, and my sister would produce that event and make sure that it looked a lot like what it was meant to from the beginning. Maybe you work with artists, or you are an artist that comes up with a vision, or you work with a director who comes up with some sort of an idea of, here's where we want to land. This is what we're trying to create. And a producer works with the available materials and people to produce that result. Okay, that's an okay definition for where we're starting today. Here's the paradigm, the awareness that I want us to think about as we move forward in this next 6 weeks together. You were called to produce life. You were called to produce life. You were called to produce things that are of interest to God. You were called to produce things that matter, things that will outlive you, things that did not exist before you existed. We are all called to be producers. And that's a paradigm that transcends the job that you're in right now, which means even whatever you do, there might be opportunities for you to produce within that line of work. And the more that we become aware of that, the more finely tuned our radar is to see those opportunities where we work. Okay, we'll get more specific about that in just a second. We are meant to produce God's vision for life. So what's the vision? What is that supposed to look like? Well, in the context of where we got this, in Genesis chapter 2, the vision looks a lot like Eden, this Garden of Eden. Now, just like finding out that your purpose is work, finding out that the vision is Eden, that may not be all that appealing to you. Because I'll be honest, when I was a kid, Eden sounded super boring to me. My understanding of Eden, and I know where I got it, maybe you got it from the same place. My vision, my understanding of Eden was it was this wonderful garden, and God was like the landscape architect that put everything in its place. And then he plops down people butt naked in the middle of it. And then, other than a few things that come naturally in that context, other than that, we are just meant to kind of be in this. It's gorgeous, but there's not a whole lot going on, all right? It's also the same thing that I thought about heaven, just with a few more wings, I think, Floating around is like these disembodied lights, maybe, I think. That's what I thought. I heard one journalist this week describe heaven as a place where you play chocolate badminton with Jerry Orbach and your childhood cat. Not quite what I had in mind. I love Jerry Orbach, though, so that would be cool. But that may be people's vision of heaven. I'll be even more transparent than this. When I was in middle school, I remember thinking this specifically. I remember wanting to delay heaven as long as possible, all right? Because when I was in junior high, what I understood about heaven did not sound all that appealing to me. I would take it over hell, okay? But it did not sound better than how some people were describing sex. So I wanted to wait until I had some of that before I got heaven, okay? You guys you're not sure you can laugh about that in a church. You can in this one, okay? That's how I felt. Man, I'm so thankful that I was wrong. We were wrong. If you believed that. Maybe you never thought that and you're like, you idiot. That idea, I got it from maybe stories that were told or books that depicted it. We tried to illustrate this idea, but that's not the vision that was written in the pages of Scripture. That idea didn't come from here. This idea of this reality, this existence, this vision of the way that life could be, or maybe even better yet, life beyond this veil, life beyond our five senses, what's really, really, really going on here. Maybe the way that things were meant to be and will be again. I think the Jewish Old Testament writers called it Eden. And I think that some of the New Testament writers called it heaven or eternity. I think Jesus called it the kingdom. And I think for our entire existence, what is really real, this vision of God has been trying to break through normal the whole time. And it's that tension that we feel that creates this longing, I believe, to be a part of something bigger than this. It's not enough for us, is it, to just get by anymore? It's not enough for us to just get ahead anymore, especially living in a time where you are only as good as the last thing you did. What is it that makes us so dissatisfied? Why isn't that enough? And I believe it's because we were created for Eden. And what is Eden? I do think it was maybe a moment in time. I think that it was an existence for a time. But Eden truly was God. It was who we are when we are in unadulterated, uninhibited, unobstructed relationship with Him. When we were able to soak all of His unconditional love deep down into our souls without shame. We were able to experience that together in community. I don't even know what that fully felt like, what that fully looked like, but I see glimpses of it more and more in communities like this. See, I think Eden was not a whole lot about the garden, but a whole lot about the master. I don't know that Eden was a whole lot about flowers and trees and apples, but a whole lot about each other. I think Eden was that relationship. And I think we are called to produce that in our lives. I think we are called to produce something that will outlive us as we experience and express reconciliation and opportunity and advocacy and hospitality and love and development. I think that we live more and more what we are meant to live as we produce hope and we produce joy and we produce comfort and we produce peace in this world. Okay? Eden was that. Eden is that. That is the kingdom. That's why we sang earlier, whether you knew it or not, that we want heaven to be here. As it is in heaven, so let it be here. We want that to break through. And whether you're a person of faith or not, I do believe it threads back to that desire that we all have to create something more than we can do by ourselves and eke out in our 80 years on this planet, okay? And I think that doing that wasn't always such hard work. I think it was much more instinctive in a time when everything was about God. We didn't have to second guess and hesitate in our relationships with each other. We didn't have to hide anymore. I think that's the amazing moment that's created at the end of Genesis chapter 2 when it says Adam and Eve were sitting there naked and they felt no shame. I think what's really going on there is humanity completely itself without having to hide or posture or position at all. So what would it be for us to recreate those moments in this community, for people not to have to be anything other than completely themselves and experience love in this place? Maybe that's what we're called to produce, okay? What would it mean for us to bring all of that life and unconditional love to the people that we get to serve, whatever we do in our day-to-day tasks? See, this is what I feel we must do, even in the midst of the things that we feel we have to do. I think it only got tough after we decided to choose something more than God to live for. I think that's what was really happening in the fall. It wasn't just about disobeying God in this one little policy that He made about a tree. I think we wanted more than Him. We wanted different than Him. And as soon as life became about us, then all of the activity of life became about us. That's why the curse was logical, right? Because the curse devolved this vibrant, life-producing work into survival. Work is for us, right? You tell me about your job, and I'll tell you how you survive, how you put food on the table, and how you pay rent. You tell me about that dream that you have, and I'll tell you a little bit about how you feel you'll grade yourself in this world. I mean, for some of us, that's the only grade we get, is how much work we can produce, how high we are on that ladder. You know, for me, it's how perfect my kids end up. That's how good I am. That's who I am. So what am I saying? I'm saying, well, then trust in God, become a Christian, and then life and work become easy without toil. What a ridiculous statement. And we still live in a broken world. I mean, our bodies still have sickness, and every birth means a death, and work is hard. We do have to work to survive. We will generate some sense of identity and accomplishment by the stuff that we're able to produce. And that's just, it is what it is. But with the good news of what Jesus was able to do to give us a way to reunite with this God, to finally discover his unconditional love that's always been there for us. The beauty of that is that, again, we are able to believe that the best is yet to come. I love that God placed us in Eden at the precise moment he did, because Eden wasn't done. If you remember that, if you've read the first couple chapters, it's like he put all of the pieces in place, and then before anything propagated, he puts humanity in the middle of it. Almost as if to say, I see that this is good, but just you wait. Just you wait what we can create together. See, that's where my faith takes me. My faith takes me to a place where I will work hard, yeah. And I do have to survive, yeah. And there are things that I must do, yes. But I do believe that the best is yet to come, and I get to tap into those opportunities every single day. I am called to produce outcomes that matter to God. I am called to produce eternal results. You and I are called to do stuff that matters, okay? Now, I want to bring this down as close as I can to your life this week. I'm going to try and make this as practical as I can without losing sight of what we're up to today. All we're up to today is just a paradigm shift. That it's okay for you to keep tethered to that longing to be doing more than you're doing now, or be a part of something bigger than just surviving, okay? But I'm also aware of the fact that today there's some big game that's being played, and that's probably the only thing on some of your minds, and that's okay. That's cool. You should know this about me if you don't know anything about me at all. I had forgotten that there was anything else going on today when I woke up this morning, and then I saw it on my Twitter feed, and I was like, oh, there's a game. Somebody's playing a game somewhere in the world. And that may cause you to respect me less, and that's cool. That's all right. You know? But I want to arm you with a question. You know, I think sometimes paradigms are, we can apply them to our lives by just asking good questions about the way we experience life. And since we may have our minds elsewhere today, which is great, maybe write this down and come back to it tomorrow, or come back to it Tuesday or Wednesday. But I want you to wrestle this question to the ground, because I do think that it's actually going to cause you to thrive and produce more energy in the place that you're already working, the place that you're already at, and maybe even create some interest and curiosity for things that are different than what you're doing, okay? So here's the question that I want us to walk away with, the one that I don't want you to forget, the one that this is a gift that you're giving yourself, is to answer this question. Here it is. What about what I do matters to God? You might not even know how to begin to answer that. That's okay. Start somewhere. What about what I do matters to God? What about what I do matters to God? If you believe, or you can bring yourself to believe, that God created you with a purpose, that the why that is expressed here rings true for you, that you were called to produce something that will outlive you, something with eternal significance, then I want you to leverage that idea. I want you to lean into that this week and see if you can't come up with a few little moments, opportunities that you have wherever you're at right now, of things that God is wanting to do through you. I sketched out a couple of them this morning, and I don't know if this will be a helpful place to start, but maybe this will spur some ideas in your own head. If you're in a leadership position wherever you're at, God has positioned you to greatly augment and encourage people's potential, or maybe to provide employment for people to help families thrive. God cares about that. If you are in finance, maybe God is positioning you for increased generosity or to allow ideas to live that don't have funding for it, or people to have resources that they don't have. If you feel like you're in one of those holding pattern roles, you're in retail or in the service industry, you are positioned very well to provide unadulterated hospitality to people who maybe in every other aspect of their lives are feeling judged or left out or kept out. You interact with people every single day at an acute point of need. Maybe you're in an industry of counseling or of psychological encouragement, whatever that is, therapy. We have a few of those that are in this community. I think you have an incredible opportunity to move people past their wound so that they don't sit there too long and become their wound, you know? You actually have a chance to show people a vision of how God may use that story to pull somebody else out of the darkness, okay? If you're a parent in this room, God has put you in the most strategic leadership position on the planet. And he didn't put you there because you're a perfect person. And he's not expecting your kids to be perfect, which is really good news because my kids are they're quite a bit shy of perfect, okay? And I'm not sure I can get them there. No, he put you there to be a real person, doing your best to love a real person and show them, maybe give them a fighting chance to expect unconditional love, to not settle for anything less than that. You know, as I look at my kids, I realize that I don't love them because I need to. I love them because I choose to. And I have to make that choice over and over and over again. I don't love my kids because of what they do for me. I love my kids because of who they are. And that sounds really familiar to me. There's an opportunity in front of each of us this week to explore, thrive, experience just a glimpse of what we are called to do in this world. And you may not even have to change your job to do it. So maybe explore that question with the people that you already pour yourself into, or the place that you already pour so much of your life into. You could probably come up with better answers than I could, but I want to give you something to start with there, okay? There's something about where God has positioned you right now that matters to him, okay? There is. So answer that question for yourself, wrestle that to the ground.